write our Declaration of Independence. Well, if I'm the one to do it, they'll run their quill pens through it. I'm obnoxious and disliked, you know that, sir.
Yes, I know. Yeah, well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's wonderful of you to do this, and I know that you have so many good stories to tell about 1776 from 1969 and a little before. Didn't you come in a little bit before 1969?
I guess so. I get confused sometimes with the dates, but yes, it was around that time that I was very surprised to be asked if I would be interested in
How so?
in doing this show. Well, I had directed a number of musicals at the Williamstown Theater Festival and some regional theaters, and then I got lucky, and we had a musical fallout at Lincoln Center that Richard Rogers produced. It was we used to do original musicals, and so when this musical fell out, I got to do this musical called Booth, about the Booth family.
Mm-hmm.
And
Jane Booth was assassinated.
yeah, exactly. This was about Junius Booth, the father, and Edwin, the son, and sort of a theatrical piece, and written by a dear friend, Austin Pendleton. And at any rate, Jerome Robbins came and saw it, and afterward, because Austin knew him, Austin introduced me to Jerry, and we had a long talk, and it was wonderful because he said, here's where you went wrong, here's what you did right, and then the ushers threw us out, and I said, this is terrible, I'm learning something, and I'm being tossed out of the theater. And he said, well, come on down to my studio tomorrow, I'd love to talk to you some more, so I did. And he was terrific, and that was it, and I didn't hear another word from him or speak to him. And about a year later, my sort of day job was a Broadway lighting designer.
Okay.
And I was working on a show called Noel Coward's Sweet Potato, which was an assembly of Noel Coward material. And we were at the Booth Theater, and it wasn't going very well, and I was standing out in Schubert Alley having a cigarette when some kid ran up and said, are you Peter Hunt? Yes. Well, Stuart Ostro wants to know who your agent is. He wants you to do a Broadway musical. Well, first of all, I was shocked. And secondly, I didn't have an agent, so I quickly thought, and the only agent I could think of was Austin Pendleton's agent. So I said, Deborah Coleman. And he said, great. And he left, and I went into the stage door telephone and called up Deborah Coleman and asked her if she would be my agent. And she said, no, honey, I've got way too many clients. I'm too busy right now. And I said, oh, boy, that's too bad. I just got caught in a lie. I think I've been offered directing a Broadway show. She said, just a minute, I'll get back to you. So she did call back and said, yes, they are interested in you. And it turns out that Stuart Ostro, evidently both Sherman Edwards and Peter Stone and Stuart were having a tough time finding a director. A lot of people really actually thought this was kind of a silly project, which I found out once I got into it. And so a lot of big-name directors had turned it down. And so Ostro, in his desperation, was having lunch with Robbins, and they were discussing another project when he said, do you by any chance know some kid that nobody knows? And Robbins said, no, I'm a dance guy. I don't know directors. And then as the lunch went on, Robbins suddenly said, wait a minute. There is this guy, I don't know his name, but he did this show a year ago about the Booth family, and he might be right for this. And so that's really, I owe it all to Jerome Robbins. That's how it kind of happened.
How old were you?
I was 29.
29?
Yeah. And so then I went in and I read the script, which was huge. I mean, it was desperately long.
Yeah.
And I wasn't totally sure about the tone of it. I didn't quite understand it. And Stuart then said, well, let me have Sherman Edwards play one of the songs. So I went into this little room that was the size of a closet that had a little spinet piano there, and he got more noise out of that piano than you can believe. And he hit a couple of notes and turned right in my face and sang, "Sit down, John." And at that moment, I instantly knew what the style of the show was. It just washed over me. And I said, I get it. I know how to do this show.
What the hell are they waiting for?
Sit down, John. Sit down, John. Dancing, John. Sit down.
If we're the only of the original creative team, there's just me and Ostro. Everybody else has passed away, and and I don't think he got it because he wrote me back a whole silly email about Hiawatha. I forgot about it. I sort of launched into it when I mentioned that after the first week, Stuart Ostro decided that we needed a new choreographer, and he all along had wanted Anna White very badly, and she didn't like the show. She didn't understand it. She turned it down, and she was out in Las Vegas, and Stuart convinced her agent, Abe Newborn, to fly her back, and major changes had been done, and that she had to come and listen to it again. And so Ostro just really put on the dog for this one. He rented a suite at the Plaza Hotel, and he put in hors d'oeuvres, caviar, champagne, a grand piano, you name it. And so we all go off there and stand around all beautifully dressed and everything. Anna arrives and bowing and scraping, and she sits down. And Sherman sits down at the piano and plays and sings the score. Anna, meanwhile, does not have any caviar or champagne or anything. And she gets up and walks out in the hall, and Abe Newborn says, "I'll be back in just a minute." And so Abe comes back and says, no, she doesn't want to do the show. And so we're all standing around and look at each other. And at that point, I don't know who first had the idea, but we went and got laundry bags out of the closet and filled them full of the caviar and the champagne to take home. So we didn't want to waste it. And we went down into the lobby, and there was this young, very attractive couple looking quite forlorn, sitting on a bench. And Sherman walked over and he said, "You don't look so happy. What's the matter?" And they said, "Well, we just got married, and they don't have a room for us. It's our honeymoon, and they don't have a room." And Sherman said, "You now have a suite." And he handed them the key to this suite. And it was such a lovely thing to do. And I always thought that gesture gave us a good karma somewhere. We got paid back. In fact, in a way, we got paid back the next day because Ostro called me in the middle of the night and said, "I want you to do a run-through of the show for Anna White tomorrow." I said, "We've never done a run-through. I don't think they're ready." He said, "I don't care if they're ready. You're going to do a run-through." So I went in and I said to the cast, "We're doing a run-through," and they all screamed and hollered and yelled. But they did a run-through, and they did a wonderful job. And at the end, Anna stood up with tears streaming down and said, "I have to do the show." But the point of this story was Sherman giving the key to that room. That I think that gesture somehow had something to do with the success of the show that we gave this newlyweds. So, thanks. I just wanted to